Help me, Belinda.
So The Front Room. This is a new sort of psychological horror film from independent film studio A24, and Max and Sam Eggers, the directors, are the younger brothers of Robert Eggers, who has
Mm-hmm.
made a big name for himself in the indie film community and in the horror community. He's made films like The Witch and The Lighthouse. He will be releasing Nosferatu later this year, which I know you and I are both very excited about. And now his younger brothers are stepping up behind the camera in the directorial chair for their first feature film, and also getting Brandy to come back to the horror genre. I don't know if she's really made a horror film since I Still Don't Know What You Did Last Summer. I don't know if she's done anything on the in between. If she has, I would not be aware of it. But that sort of, I think would be somewhat of a cult hit amongst a certain demographic. Particularly, I think our demographic is being millennials. Like if you grew up with those films, you grew up in the slasher teen movie phase of the mid '90s. Obviously, the I Don't Know What You Did Last Summer films, pretty much ripping off Wes Craven and Scream, but Brandy was a big part of that sequel movie. But now she's coming back here in this brand new psychological horror film with these really impressive young filmmakers. And this is another one we got a chance to go check out this past weekend. So with all that out the way, man, I will pass it to you. What did you think about this brand new film, The Front Room?
Oh, The Front Room. So I obviously came into this movie. Of course, I was excited to see the Egger brothers, and I was excited to see Catherine Hunter, and of course it's A24, all those things. But I was really here to see Brandy, the icon that she is, return to the big screen. Like you said, it's been a long time since she's been specifically in a horror film. I know she was in like Descendants 3 or something like that, and some other Christmas movies. I don't know. She's been doing stuff, but it's been a long time since she's been in horror. And I was excited to check this out because of that. And those who don't know, this movie follows Brandy, and she's newly pregnant. And she has to move in with her mother-in-law, and she finds out her mother-in-law is like a super mega Christian, and she tries to, she kind of tries to dictate her and her husband / baby daddy's life at when she moves in some ways. And so this movie it wasn't for me, man. This movie wasn't for me. I didn't like it at all, really. There's not much I liked about it, to be honest. I liked that Brandy was here. I liked Catherine Hunter, who was just so talented and who was going for everything, and she was killing it in every scene she was in. She is so good at being creepy and it like gets under your skin when you see her do certain things in the movie, and even just the way she has such a physical scariness to her. Like when you see the way she looks, I think there is something that people can make geriatricness in old people scary. We've seen that happen in movies like The Visit. Even I think of is like, whoa, y'all are old, but y'all are old and scary for certain reasons. And I think Catherine Hunter again does just such a good job of bringing, I think, that some kind of horror presence, that eeriness to the screen. Not only that, but this movie has a ton of, I guess you can call it body horror in it, but in my mind, I call it like fluid horror, because that's what it is. There's a lot of shit and piss in this movie, and it was killing me. I ain't gonna lie to you. It's actually really hard to spoil my appetite. Like I watch a lot of movies eating popcorn, sometimes Chipotle. But there's a couple moments in this movie I was like, I have to put my food down. Like I can't eat anymore. Like it really was spoiling my appetite. And that was really rare for me. So I will say, for a movie to be able to do that for me, that part is impressive. On the actual story side in this film, there wasn't much for me here. I think there's a little bit of fun to be had in kind of this back and forth that Brandy and Catherine Hunter's character was doing. That is pretty much the movie, is this sister or this mother-in-law and daughter relationship, and what that looks like, and how religion can do weird things and all of that other stuff. But it didn't, for me, it didn't have enough to say for it to be interesting. A lot of the beats just weren't hitting for me. A lot of the stuff that I thought was going to come out on the other end of being a more interesting plot point never amounted to anything. And by the end of it, I was just like, oh, that's the end of the movie. It's hella short, which I usually wouldn't be mad at, but I just feel like we didn't get anything in the hour and a half that I think that I was looking for. So overall, man, I did not like The Front Room. I was expecting or just I'm not even expecting, because to be honest, I really didn't know how to feel about this movie coming into it. But I was hoping for more, knowing that Brandy was a part of this, and it was an A24 horror film with the Egger brothers. I was like, oh shoot, we might have something. But unfortunately, pretty much across the board, it kind of fell flat for me.
So I'm on the other side of it. I like this movie. I thought that it was somewhat of a surprise because I was going in not excited really at all for this film.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the Eggers brothers were behind it, but I was still just really hesitant ultimately as to whether or not I was going to enjoy it and what it was going to really offer up. We just get inundated with so many horror movies these days, and a lot of them don't really have anything interesting to say, and so that's become just sort of the norm. But I walked away kind of pleasantly surprised by this because I think at the end of the day, this movie probably shouldn't be viewed as this religious psychological horror movie. This is low key a dark comedy, if you ask me, because I laughed my ass off a lot of times throughout
Mm-hmm.
this movie. It was really, really hysterical to me, largely because of Catherine Hunter, who was on 1000 this entire movie. I mean, she is going for it in every single scene. She's terrorizing Brandy every chance and every opportunity that she gets. And I find it absolutely hysterical. Her accent, her blatant overt racism, her inability to walk correctly, her shitting and pissing all over herself and doing it intentionally. I found that stuff quite hilarious just because the execution of it was just so campy to me. And I find it interesting because the Egger brothers, obviously being related to Robert Eggers, in watching this movie, this reminds me a lot of The Lighthouse and what Willem Dafoe
Mm-hmm.
was doing in that movie against Robert Pattinson. He's an older guy in that film, and he's almost just doing certain shit to be irritable and to be annoying to Robert Pattinson, not just because he's like out of his mind or he's senile or whatever you want to call him. Like, he's actually doing it to drive this other person crazy. And that's exactly what Catherine Hunter was doing in this movie. In real life, she is 67 years old and she's playing this woman like she's 115. Like, she is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely decrepit and ancient. And it works every single time for me. And Brandy, I was really, really impressed by just her acting chops and just her ability to kind of hold her own in a lot of these scenes with Catherine Hunter. Now, it doesn't really go any deeper than that. It's not really telling anything on a deep level. All of the stuff that they're doing here is it's pretty surface, but what I did enjoy just in totality about The Front Room is the fact that in horror, in this genre, we've gotten a ton of movies about motherhood and what
Yeah.
motherhood looks like, because I think that there's just a natural ability to tell that story that can be relatable, motherhood and how it ties in with these themes and ideas of horror, all the way back to Rosemary's Baby to even these recent films that we've talked about this year, like Immaculate. But we
Mm-hmm.
haven't really seen a ton of films about what it's like to care for the elderly when they're on their way out, when you actually have
Mm-hmm.
to be there. And they basically kind of revert to being babies. They can't take care of themselves, really. They probably can't walk all that well. You have to clean up after them. They need sort of physical aids like bells and whistles or whatever to call upon. Like, we don't really see that done in any medium, in any genre, really, because it's not a great idea. It's not a welcoming idea. I think a lot of us kind of stray away from that stuff because we don't want to think about our parents or our grandparents getting old and perhaps having to care for them and having to be
Yeah.
there for them. But the fact that they take that and turn it into a quote unquote horror movie and play upon that and do so in a campy way, I enjoyed it. I think that they absolutely knew what they were doing here. I feel like everybody a part of the movie, they knew what type of movie they were telling. I guess the one big drawback for me is that the ending and the outcome is super predictable. Like, after you see everything that goes down, it's like, well, of course that would happen. Of course it would go down
Mm-hmm.
that way. But ultimately, I thought it was a pretty good first attempt from these Egger brothers, and I think they're certainly, they have a long way to go to try to really match the aesthetic and the style and the tone of what Robert is achieving with his films, because he's just on a different level entirely. But I think it's a good first outing. I think it's a pretty impressive first outing. And the fact that they pulled a pretty decent Brandy performance out of it also, I found to be enjoyable. So ultimately, I thought it was a pretty decent film. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new A24 film, The Front Room. If you've checked this out, or if you plan to check it out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think about it.